So it's about 7:05. We're going to get started. Good evening, everyone. My name's Pete Mancuso. For those of you who don't know me, I think I recognize most faces on here. I'm president of the University of Buffalo Alumni Association. And I'm just happy to welcome everyone, alumni and current UB Rugby players, to our professional networking program speaker series. This is our first one that we're holding, although the professional networking program started about a year ago. This is a new avenue that we're rolling out. And basically, just for those of you who don't know, the professional networking program, we started it and we're designing it to help current UB Rugby players as well as UB Rugby alumni connect with their UB Rugby alumni in a professional setting and access those resources. We have a wide range of professions covered by our alumni all over the country in many different regions. So we thought that this would be a good idea to help people connect on a more professional level and provide something to our students and our alumni beyond the rugby field and after graduation. So like I said, tonight's our first speaker, and we're very happy and honored to have Bob Swan, class of 1983. Join us. I think it's fair to say he's one of our more prestigious alums who has played for UB Rugby. So Bob, I'd like to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule, to be with us tonight. So we're really happy to have you here. And when I met Bob virtually before this session in our little breakout room, I said, we got to get him back to Buffalo for Alumni Weekend. And in fact, those of you who know, been to Alumni Weekend recently, we have been honoring classes from the past, and we've already penciled it in that next year is going to be the 40th anniversary of the first Alumni Weekend, which took place in 1984, which Bob was instrumental in those teams. So I'm putting a marker down right now. You got plenty of notice, Bob. We want to see you in Buffalo Alumni Weekend 2024. But I'll leave it at that. Before we move on, I just want to also introduce and thank Paul Schenkel, class of, I believe, 85. He's the founder of our professional networking committee and program. And Paul is going to be our MC tonight. So at this time, without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Paul and get started. So thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Pete. And thanks everybody for joining us. I know it was a little challenging with everybody's schedules to find a time that worked across time zones and school and work. So appreciate everybody taking time to join us. We're recording this, so anybody that doesn't make it will be able to listen to this on demand later on. So, as Pete said, we started this program as a way to make these connections between players, alumni, and across the generations, and particularly for people that are not local to Buffalo or New York area where we have concentrations. I felt like we needed a way to include people that are not, in one of those cities or that could not come to the the in-person events because of schedules or travel required. So really excited to continue to build this program out. I want this session to be participatory. We all have day jobs in school. This should be fun. It should be informal. We're not going to put Bob on the hot seat. We just, we want to learn from his experience, and hopefully, what he's going to share with you will help maybe light some ideas or foster some connections. So, what I would like to do, though, before I do an introduction, is if you guys in the chat could put the year you graduated or the year you expect to graduate, just so we have an idea of the representation. Everybody know where the chat is down below? Awesome. All right, so we got a really good mix from teams in the couple 80s guys like Bob, myself, Fred, some 90s, 2000s, and a lot of current students. It's awesome. And please continue to use that chat if you have a question or there's something you want to ask. Again, we want to make this interactive. So what I'd like to do to kind of transition into the actual interview session here is introduce Bob. And I'm not going to go through his career highlights or resume. It's really just to frame the conversation. And then I'll kind of start with got 4 sections: his time in Buffalo as a student, as a player, kind of transitioning into his professional time, moving up the career ladder, and then some time for reflection. And then we'll kind of wrap things up with what might come next as a follow-on session with additional speakers. So, as Pete said, Bob was one of our first choices, just given his success, given what he's been able to accomplish professionally, over several decades since his time at Buffalo. Bob grew up in upstate New York, outside of Syracuse, or in Syracuse. Currently lives in Northern California. He is currently operating partner at Anderson Horowitz, a venture capitalist firm. Before that, he was CFO and later CEO of Intel, which I'm sure everyone has heard of. And he's been in executive management and finance roles at GE, Webvan, TRW, EDS, and eBay. And I'm sure Bob will share some of his experience at these companies as we go through the conversation. So welcome, Bob. Thank you again for being here.
Great to be here. Really a thrill for me to join you guys.
Excellent. And I want to start with your time at Buffalo. We were just chit-chatting a little bit before we started, and thinking back to those early 80s, what do you remember? What did you take away from your time at Buffalo? Were you a finance major? Kind of describe your time at UB.
Yeah, I came to campus in September of 1980, just to level set how old I am. Almost as old as Fred, but not as old. And I transferred in from a school in Albany. I grew up in Syracuse, as you said. I transferred in from Siena College. So I showed up on the first day of class and knew absolutely nobody. I was familiar with the climate, so that wasn't an adaptation for me, but I knew nobody. I knew the game of rugby because I had played it for a few years. So my experience was really kind of twofold. One was studying, because I was paying my way through school, so I had to make it worthwhile. But the other was the camaraderie and the teamwork associated with rugby, which was a very important part of, I'd call it my foundational learning. I lived on, I was trying to figure out where I lived. I live on Englewood. I don't know if that street even exists. I know the house that we lived in is no longer there because somebody burnt it down long after I was there. I hung out at PJ Bottoms and Third Base, where a couple of the bars, I don't know if they exist anymore because I haven't been back in a while. And I felt like I benefited from an incredible foundation, both a foundation of, for me, what I view, 40 years later, running a company is a team sport. And like everything about running a company is a team sport. So in so many ways, I've leveraged the experience I had in the classroom, but frankly, more in the camaraderie of playing the game of rugby with 10 other folks trying to compete and win and do something special on the pitch. That was as foundational for me in the rest of my career. It kind of started with team sport as a kid and team sport and rugby in upstate New York and Buffalo.
So you said you had played before coming to UB. You played in Syracuse growing up or in high school?
No, I went to Siena College and I started started as a freshman. When I was in high school, I played high school basketball, and my dad had promised me that when I was a senior in high school, like him, I was going to grow 7 inches. So when I was in high school, I figured another 7 inches, I'm probably going to go right into the NBA out of school. But during the course of that year, those 7 inches didn't seem to materialize. So when I went off, so I wasn't going into the NBA, I was going to school. When I went to school, I loved team sport. But without the 7 inches, it wasn't going to be basketball. And I kind of discovered rugby on day one on campus and played it for a few years before arriving at UB.
Yeah, you were a rare, experienced player. A lot of these guys are learning first time after they arrive.
My recollection of how good and experienced I was, I'd put under the umbrella of the older I get, the better I was. And if there were nobody to check me on facts on the phone, Paul, like maybe you or Fred, I'd feel much better about ad-libbing about my prowess at the time. But with you guys here, I'm going to be a little bit constrained.
No worries. So academically, what degree did you end up with from UB?
A BS from the School of Management.
School of Management. Okay. And you mentioned the rugby pitch and kind of that, that teamwork being really, foundational for you. On the academic side, was anybody guiding you or helping you or mentoring you?
No, I went to Siena College and I was there for 2 years. My first semester, I had a 2.1 GPA. My second was a 2.2. My third semester was a 2.3, and my fourth semester was a 2.4. And the reality was, again, my family could ill afford to pay for me to be at such an expensive school, and I was embarrassed with myself for, my performance in class wasn't quite as good as my performance on the field. So my first tests, I remember it, in some ways like it was yesterday. In Buffalo was calculus, and I got an A on it. And frankly, it was the first day I had on a class since high school. And I said, if I can get an A on a test, there's no excuses. I should get an A on every test. And I aced. I got a 4.0 in my 3 years in Buffalo, and I went to grad school afterwards and got a 4.0. But the real catalyst for me was I realized, holy shit, I can do this. And if I can do it, then there's no excuses not to. And again, because for me, my family had to suffer a little bit to help me get through school. So it had to be worthwhile. But the one of the real meaningful days in my first semester on campus was to kind of get an A in a class when I realized I have no more excuses.
Yeah, well, it sounds like the transfer was a good decision, and you made the most of it, and it was the right decision for you. I wanted to ask a fun fact here of your time in Buffalo. It's a hardball question, Bob. What's your favorite Buffalo food? Choices are chicken wings, beef on weck, mighty taco, or something else.
Chicken wings, Duff's. I don't know. Does Duff still exist?
Yes.
There's 4 of them now.
Sure does. Yeah.
So a friend of mine, this is about maybe 10 years ago now. We've been out in California for 17 years. He started up a company like people do out here, and he basically wanted to, it's called Foodie Direct. And he was like, I want to allow people to tap into a cuisine from across the country, no matter where they were. So that was his idea. So, I was, hanging out with him in the formative stage of this. And I just said, look, first thing you got to do is do it at campuses, because everybody remembers their favorite food at campus in town. And I said, and when you figure out that campus is the right answer, could you do me a favor, go to Buffalo and allow me to get Duff's chicken wings? And there's some pizza shop that was right around the corner from us. It was pretty popular at the time. So about 10 years ago, even though I haven't been to Buffalo in a long time, I was able to order Duff's chicken wings delivered to my home. Bocce's, I think it's Bocce's Pizza. I don't, does that exist? Bocce's Pizza?
Yeah, still there, Bobby.
Awesome. So I had those two things delivered to my home, but Duff's chicken wings, definitely the favorite. But when they weren't open at 4 a.m., Fred would drag me to Mighty Taco, is my recollection.
Sounds about right. That's where that's about the hour most of my dining occurred at Mighty Taco. All right, we're going to transition a little bit after Buffalo days, and I wanted to ask you about kind of your first job after college, making that transition. Was General Electric your first job after college? Kind of how did you get that job? Kind of, what was that like, making that transition?
Well, first I went directly from undergrad in Buffalo to grad school in Binghamton. It's SUNY Binghamton, and the reason, one of the reasons for doing that was, there's some terms thrown around now that we haven't heard of in a long time. One is this thing called inflation. Well, in the late 70s, the last time that word was thrown around, was, we had inflation, interest rates were at 20% at the time. And shortly after that followed a deep recession in the early 80s, which just happened to be when I was graduating. So we went from inflationary times to deep, prolonged recession with unemployment relatively high. So the idea of finding a job was pretty challenging. So I actually went directly to grad school in Binghamton. And then how I got to GE, in some ways it's maybe a little bit embarrassing. But I played for the Binghamton men's rugby team when I was in the area, and they didn't, when I graduated from school, they didn't want me to leave because they wanted me to stay on the rugby team. A bunch of them worked at GE, and so they rallied around, frankly, finding me a job at GE right there in Binghamton out of school. And, so in some ways I was incredibly lucky. It wasn't, and I had a 4.0 in Binghamton, and I didn't get hired because of my brilliance. I got hired because I knew a bunch of folks on the rugby team, the camaraderie that comes with rugby. These folks kind of put their reputation on the line to get me a job. And that's kind of how I started. And it was a blessing because, I ended up working at GE for about 15 years, Paul. And it was a company that was just fantastic and provided all sorts of opportunities for me. But at its foundation, I kind of got the job because I was a decent rugby player, and they didn't want me to leave.
But that's what this is all about. And, I love you sharing that story. And that's why we created this program, was to foster those connections, whether it's, Buffalo to Buffalo or, rugby to rugby, we want to, the whole purpose of this professional networking program is the networking side of it. So I love that, that's a perfect story why we're doing this, why these relationships that we create now last for decades. And we're all part of this community, whether it's the UB community, the rugby community, those communities overlap, and we're here to share stories and help each other out. So I think that's awesome. I didn't know that, so I appreciate you sharing that. And then I guess on that theme about networking and mentoring, you were 15 years at GE. Were your rugby guys your go-to advisors, or did you branch out to some other professional folks that you started to turn to that helped you move your way through the organization?
I mean, in some ways, the rugby guys, whatever, 40 years later are more dear friends than they are mentors. But along the way, this will seem kind of perverse, but in GE, the way the company worked at the time, particularly for young people that they thought had some potential, is they moved you around a lot. So you moved, at a time every 90 days, I went to a different place in the world with a different team to do something different, in a different GE business. And the diversity of it was incredible. And the meritocracy of the system of people who could accomplish things was kind of how you got ahead. So I was, blessed to have gotten in the company, but then it just created an atmosphere where you were joining a different team all the time. And again, from the days of rugby, and I played while I was at GE, but I was moving around and joining kind of different teams along the way. So when I was in Louisville, Kentucky, where GE Appliances were located, I'd go out and play with the team, the Louisville team. And when I was in Cincinnati, Ohio, I would go out and work out with the team in Cincinnati that had a Brian Fraser, Fred, I think was his name. He graduated from UB and went out to Cincinnati. So I kind of joined teams along the way as I was working on advancing my career in this incredible system called GE. And in each team that you're on, whether it's sport or business, you get a chance to meet people where you're going to go through things together. And usually, solving complicated problems. And so, in many ways, it wasn't the sport of rugby, but it was the sport of business. And much like rugby, you win as a team or you lose as a team. And that's kind of how the GE experience for me, and frankly, my career, was always about you join a new team and your role on that team is to make that team better than they thought was possible before you arrived. And to make that team, your presence on that team is a responsibility that the team will again perform at a level they didn't think possible until you arrive there. It's always the way I approached rugby. And it is always the way that I approached my professional career, which is you join a bunch of different teams and your role is to make that team better in some way, shape, or form. And that foundation of moving around in the GE system kind of gave me an opportunity with each team to try in some way, shape, or form, help that team perform at a level that they didn't think was possible before I got there. And that's been the common theme from their Tuesdays and Thursday nights at Ellicott to Saturday afternoons. Is every interaction was a desire to, how do you, with a responsibility on that team, help that team perform at a different level? And you don't just show up on Saturdays to do it. You got to condition, you got to be prepared, you got to work hard. And, that's been the ingredients, whether I'm on the pitch or in the boardroom, is how do you make that team better because of your presence?
Awesome. No, that's great. I'm gonna take a pause here. See if anybody has a question they want to ask Bob or put in the chat.
Hey, just while the team is thinking about questions, I have one.
Yeah.
I think when I was scrolling down the names, I thought I saw the name Lefkowitz. Would that happen to be any relation to Scott Lefkowitz?
Yeah, that's my dad.
Awesome. Well, Michael, please pass along my regards.
All right, I will.
Actually, Bob, I'll accept that directly, and I do have a question, if it's okay.
Yeah. Go for it.
And that is, hey, Bob, why is your jersey so clean?
Okay, first off, who's asking the question?
Scott Lefkowitz.
Oh, Scott, how are you doing?
Hey, doing all
Why
right.
is- Why is my, just for the rest of you, I was saying before we got on, I got home and ran in and was running a couple minutes late, and I wanted to find my jersey from back in the day, and believe it or not, I have it. And Scott was kind enough to point out, there is some dirt on it, Scott, but it's kind of down near the waist area. But this is my University of Buffalo alumni side from 1992. Yeah, I think it's somewhat clean because it's been in the closet probably since August of 92, the week or so after I wore it at Saranac Lake. I think it's been in multiple closets since then. I was just relieved that, like most of my prized possessions that have made it into the garbage along the way from my wife, this one kind of lasted. So I was kind of thrilled to put it on. Thanks a lot for making fun of me for not having any dirt on it.
I
was just saying because you were prolific forward and back, and you were making lots of tackles. So
So that's it. That's it. Yeah. Yeah. What he said. Nice to hear from Scott.
I'm duly impressed. Yes, we have the Lefkowitz legacy here. Which,
Hey, Paul, I got a question.
yeah.
Bob, you obviously were a good athlete and played numerous different sports, growing up and as you got into your teen and your 20 years. Anything about the sport of rugby that obviously you found later in life, compared to, childhood, that I guess was different, or that prepared you, or that you took away from rugby as opposed to other sports, and how it helped you in your career, or in school, or in some way? I know I have my own feelings about that, so I was wondering what your thoughts are about rugby in particular, rather than other team sports.
Well, I've kind of shared this probably 1,000 times, initially with my parents, who couldn't quite understand why I was playing. But in essence, there's no timeouts, which to me makes it just like business. You don't go back into a huddle and figure out what you're going to do next. That business does not allow that. You just got to figure it out as you go. Number two, your position on the field changes based on the facts and circumstances that are happening in front of you. You're not slotted into, I'm a prop, therefore I'm going to be a prop all the time, because the practical reality is, as you all know, overloads and competition is moving, they're adjusting, they're adapting, they're bringing a new set of plays that the team didn't bring the week before. And therefore, positions on the field are somewhat irrelevant for 95% of the game. So you adjust, you adapt, and you're there for your teammate in the moment. And that's what business is all about. So for me, rugby is the most directly akin to the sport of business. You don't get to call timeout in business. You don't really have you have people who have to adjust the game that they're going to play based on the facts and circumstances that happen in front of them. So that to me makes it so relevant. Filling voids, being there for your teammate, taking the responsibility of, as the sport is, life or death is a massive exaggeration, but you got to be there when people need you, or somebody's going to get hurt. That's what business is like. You got to be there when your teammate needs you, or else somebody's going to get hurt. They're going to lose, they can lose their life's wages. So the responsibility that comes on the pitch to be there when you're needed most, even though that wasn't the play that was called, that you're adjusting to the practical realities on the field, I just think is so much like rugby. I'm sorry, so much like business. And then the last thing that, I more, kind of learned along the way, when I showed up to the rugby field, I showed up to win the game. I just wanted to win. That's why I practiced. That's why I conditioned. I wanted to win. But sometimes everybody doesn't show up to the game for the same reason. And sometimes people show up because, guys or gals drink beers afterwards, or it's fun, or they played sport in high school and they want the camaraderie. The point is, a bunch of people show up for different reasons, and the role of a leader on the pitch is, how do you get them to act as one, with the intent, for me, of winning the game, even though people show up for different reasons. That's business. People show up to the office who don't necessarily show up to win. They show up to do their job. They show up to make a wage. They may show up to have the wherewithal to take care of their parents or their kids. They show up for different reasons. But when they get there, the role of the leader is to try to organize people who show up for a different reason to still have the desire to win the game. And that, from a leadership perspective, is, that was the one that, it struck me early on, that people show up for different reasons to play the game. I have a real desire to win. I always have. I'm not exactly sure where it came from. I know a lot of you share it. So how do you get other people who may not have shown up for the same reason to win the game, so that, I feel better and nobody gets hurt on my watch? That to me was more the leadership lesson. And I don't really, I don't think any other sport quite prepared me for the responsibility of leading on the pitch is similar to the responsibility of leading in the boardroom, because a lot of people are counting on you, but they may not have shown up for the same reasons.
Great, thank you. Speaking of the boardroom, I wanted to ask you, when you were leading Intel at that very senior level, maybe just share with the team, what was a day in the life like? Was that as intense as we all imagine? Did you feel like you were under a lot of stress, a lot of eyes on you, high expectations? Kind of what was your approach, kind of at that level? And just, I guess, kind of getting ready each day to go to battle.
Yes, all of the above, but in some ways, again, it was more than 11 people on the pitch. It was 150,000. It was broken up in terms of different teams, different business units, different functions, different products. But the competition was known. The moves they were going to make were not necessarily known. And again, I probably, in the Intel CEO role, because there's some days that you just go, oh my God, well, how did I get here? And the responsibility that comes with the role is off the charts in so many ways. The technology that you're building, powers the world. We wouldn't be on a Zoom call if it weren't for Intel chips. Chips are everywhere. Everything's kind of a computer, and Intel chips are inside it. So the responsibility that comes with it is fairly significant. But I conditioned during the week. I conditioned for 30 years. It was, in some ways, if you don't condition, you're not going to perform very well on Saturdays. So I had been conditioning for a very long time. I've been working with teams trying to position us to win against all sorts of competition over the years. So despite the inherent pressures of those kind of jobs and how lonely it can be to be at the top of a company, almost whether you're the CFO or CEO or, these senior roles can be somewhat lonely. At the end of the day, it's a game. And you want to win the game vis-a-vis the competition, and you don't exactly know how they're going to show up. So that's how I dealt with it, because absent looking at it like a game, it would be even more overwhelming than it normally is of being responsible for 150,000 families. That can be pretty daunting when the stock goes down and 150,000 employees have their 401ks or they're investing in you as the leader of the team. There's a huge responsibility. It can be paralyzing or it can be energizing. And in some ways, I think that's a choice you make. I made the choice to make it energizing. This is a game. How lucky am I? I get to play another game for another 5 years on the biggest stage to demonstrate the skills, capabilities that I've been working on forever. How fortunate, how lucky am I to have the opportunity to continue to play the game?
Yeah.
Anyways, that's kind of how I dealt with it. Desires to win with integrity, surround yourself with the best people so you're prepared to go to battle against some real competition, some that want to disrupt you and knock you off your perch. I love it. I was blessed.
Yeah, that competitive spirit certainly carried with you all these years for sure. You talked a little bit about, you kind of touched on the technology piece. One thing that I always deal with, because I'm in the technology world too, is just keeping up with everything, and how do you tap into others and kind of, stay abreast of what's going on. It's not possible, for any one person to know all of this information. So who did you, kind of, how did you keep yourself up, informed and learn and kind of aware of all the innovation happening? Well, who did you tap into for that?
Yeah. Well, it's first in Intel in particular, but in almost in every job along the way, I was the new person, joining the team. I was the new kid in the neighborhood joining the team, and I always felt like I knew less than everybody else about the underlying technology. In my career path, I chose things that I didn't know anything about. And all the, in every job I had, the only real common theme is I usually didn't know anything about the industry when I joined it. And that was kind of by design. And as such, I wasn't able on day one to go deep by any stretch on the technology. A company like Intel, the technology is on, just massive complexity. And I wasn't there as the CFO or the CEO because of my technical wizardry. I was there to inspire the masses, to help them achieve things that they didn't think was possible. In some ways, just like when you play on Saturday. So in that case, I wasn't the subject matter expert. I wasn't the technologist, and there weren't enough hours in the day for me ever to be the expert on the technology. These, 70,000 of those 150,000 people were PhDs. I always considered myself the dumbest guy in the whole company. And that's not an exaggeration. But what I do know is how to ask the right questions and how to inspire people to accomplish stuff that they don't think is possible. And through inquisition, through intellectual curiosity, as opposed to through subject matter expertise is how I led. And if that's how you lead, you've got to know the gaps that creates for team performance. You got to fill those gaps with people that, complement what it is I'm good at, and cover some of my blind spots as a leader, by, just surround yourself with those people. And that's a Saturday afternoon match. It's every job you're in. And frankly, the higher you are in an organization, the more complex it is to keep tabs of everything that goes on. So you damn well better have incredibly talented people, not that think just like you, but think differently than you, such that gaps are covered and 1 + 1 can equal 5.
Yeah, well said. We've got a question from Alex. I think this is a good question at this point in the conversation. I'll just read it out loud. Hi, Bob. When reflecting on the decades of working alongside other professional leaders, growing and winning together, what characteristics of those individuals stood out to you? Any consistencies that you saw over time?
Yeah, that's a great question. Desire to win, or fear of failure. And those are somewhat the same, but the common ingredient from the folks that I learned so much from along the way is they had an unwavering desire to win the game. I use win the game because that's my language, but they wanted the teams that they lead to be the best they could possibly be. And therefore, there was a certain degree of paranoia. No matter how well the team was performing, they instilled a certain degree of paranoia around the dynamics of the industry that were inspiring, not demotivating. So desire to win / fear of failure was kind of one of those common traits that the folks that I had a chance to work with along the way. The other one is, and I mentioned this before, intellectual curiosity, which means they didn't feel the need to be the subject matter expert at all times. They were more curious to learn from others as opposed to display their wisdom. And what that enables, and what I witnessed over time because of that common theme of intellectual curiosity, is that the rate of personal growth was steeper, directly correlated with the desire to ask questions. So if you're leading a large company, or even a large team or a small team, intellectual curiosity is energizing, and people that feel like they've arrived and they're the smartest person in the room are usually the ones that get passed pretty quickly in a competitive world. So intellectual curiosity was kind of number 2. And number 3, a philosophy that the team trumps, great teamwork trumps phenomenal individual performance. And again, those are my words with the sports analogy, but diversity of teams, and how does the whole of the team perform better than the sum of its pieces because of the environment you create for when those people show up. Those 3 things were the kind of common themes. And then, there's a bunch of other things that, I'll give you like a few, and this is some ways just because under the so blessed category. At a relatively young age, I got to work directly for this guy named Jack Welch, and he had this uncanny ability to raise the bar, not so high where you were demotivated, but high enough where you were never going to jump over it, but always want to go back and try harder because the team was counting on you. It was unbelievable. And he could do it for, that the company was probably a couple 100,000 people at the time. And he could do it I felt like he could do it for everybody in the company. Like, it was just so powerful. This other guy who's now the CEO of Boeing that I worked for a few times in GE, his name's Dave Calhoun. The art of simplicity. The guy just made everything. He understand the complexity of everything, and motivated and inspired through making the real complex simple. It was, it's just one of those lessons I learned from incredibly. Meg Whitman, who was the CEO of eBay, who hired me to join eBay, instincts and guts. Didn't feel the need to have all the information to answer a question and make decisions, but could make decisions with 60% of the information and her instincts, and had the guts to do that. There was little traits that I got to observe, and I encourage you guys, particularly the younger guys. There's so much to learn from everybody, and I have in my drawer back here, I have a list of what was it about every individual that I ever worked for that made them uniquely special. And then the more people you work for, like the more you got this collection of, very useful things that you can draw upon. So those are some of the individual characteristics, but common themes: desire to win, fear of failure, paranoia that somebody may knock you, may take your place, intellectual curiosity, and teamwork. Performance of team is much greater than the sum of the individuals because of the role you play as a leader.
Yeah, that's great. I was going to ask you to identify some people, and you already did that. So appreciate you using those examples. Owen, go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, Bob, thank you for coming. So my question would be, I noticed you mentioned a lot of times about how you switched from rugby team to rugby team, as well as from business to business. And for a lot of these guys in their last semester here, that reality is approaching pretty quickly. So what would you say would be the number one sort of action or mindset you had that allowed you to succeed so many times and so quickly when you're the new guy on the block?
I never really thought about, even to today, of having succeeded or done cool or great shit. It just never entered my mind. It was always more, join a team, get out of your comfort zone, because getting out of your bring something special to the team, but get out of your comfort zone, so that you learn new and different things, and try your best to have a real impact, not to display your own greatness, but to illuminate greatness in others. That was literally, and then from that, shit happens, and I got lucky along the way, and had some really cool opportunities. But at its core, when you join a team, I literally felt like my responsibility was to make that team better than they were before I showed up. And I did it to the best of my ability, and it was never at the expense of others. It was never to show the team how good I was. It was more because I spent my time and energy trying to illuminate how good everybody else was. And those very simple things really matter. And I think that as you go through your careers, you're going to be tasked with the pressure for advancement. In some ways will be to display your greatness. It's just kind of how things work. And the more you show that you were able to do this vis-a-vis others around you, those things tend to advance your career quicker, earlier. I think that what advanced my career maybe quicker and earlier was, I'm not that good. so trying to display my greatness, whether it's on the rugby pitch. I'm not faster than everybody else. I'm not stronger than everybody else. And I never got that 7 inches my senior year in high school. So I had to make do with what I had. And the things that were within my control was, in the sport of rugby, I was conditioned. I hated going out on the pitch, not being in better shape than everybody else out there. Just hated it, and worked hard to ensure that was the case. In business, work hard. There's no easy path. I worked hard. That to me was like conditioning. If I want to, and conditioning when you're in a team sport means if you're really well conditioned and nobody else is, that's not a path to victory. So how do you help the rest of the team be conditioned and illuminate how good they are in the journey as opposed to displaying your greatness? Because if you make 10 people better because of your presence, that's much more powerful than you can make yourself. You can only make yourself so good, but if you can illuminate and improve the performance of 10 others, it's so powerful and has a real multiplier effect. So join teams, be great at what you do, but beyond that, make those around you perform at a level that, that they didn't think was possible without you. And I apologize for the repetitiveness, but for me, that's when you ask me what kind of what worked well from the day before I graduated school. When you get a chance to be on a team, show them what you're capable of, but help them illuminate how capable they are for the role that they can play it's a much bigger multiplier.
Awesome. I think you're being a little modest, Bob, on your skill set there, but Ken, you've got the floor, and then I think after that we'll try to wrap things up and keep everybody on time here.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Swan, for coming in. We all really appreciate it. Speaking for myself, and then a lot of the guys are going to be graduating shortly, obviously kind of breaking into the workforce, even for entry-level positions nowadays, kind of seems like it's a hyper-competitive work environment. I mean, everyone seems to have a master's degree or an MBA. What's, the biggest thing that people can try and do to really differentiate themselves from everyone else in the hiring process, do you think?
Well, first, that there's a lot of IQ out there. But EQ to me is the differentiator. And again, EQ for me is there's not many jobs that you're going to be going into that performance is simply a function of the individual. It is a function of individuals that can make teams perform better. So I am so lucky for having played rugby. And I sincerely believe this. I've believed this since the day I picked up a ball, because, it's about getting teams to perform at levels that they didn't think was possible. So as you go into your first job out of school, don't underestimate how prepared you are for not just what you did in the classroom, but for what you did on the rugby pitch. And the teamwork, the camaraderie, the awareness of competition, the situational leadership that comes with playing this game is a real competitive advantage that you're not really going to know until you're a few years in, and hopefully you figured out someday and you send me a note to say that I wasn't exactly full of shit, but I said something that made sense to you. But don't underestimate the what you're learning on the pitch and the teamwork and the conditioning that's required to perform to your fullest of every day. That to me is I think that you're way more prepared for what you have coming down the pike because of rugby, frankly, than any class that you took, no matter what your discipline of study is. I think what you're learning is a real differentiator. I'd encourage you to think about it and think about your ability to communicate to somebody on the other side of the interview table, not just what you've done on the IQ front, but also what you've done in the teamwork front that has prepared you to perform at a level better than maybe those that are higher on the IQ front. I never had the problem of trying to display my greatness because of my IQ, so I had to make up for it with EQ. That's one that I just really really encourage you to think about, is how much you learn from hanging out with each other and how well that prepares you for joining a team. And again, my belief is that business is a team sport, and those that know how to play the game for the good of the team as opposed for the good of the individual our heads are going to be extremely well prepared relative to the competition.
Awesome. Do you have a couple more minutes, Bob?
Yeah.
All right, Jim, fire away.
Bob, you had mentioned before about your experience with GE and how they had a good program to move you around, and you gained a lot of experience. It sounded like, and I know some other people who have actually worked at GE and said the same thing. So it was a good training program. Some of the kids the younger guys that are coming out of college now and coming into their first job, and maybe they're not going to get that kind of varying experience. Should they have should they have a goal for like their 20s, let's say, to try and have three different jobs and vary maybe regionally, and certainly experience wise, don't have three of the same job. Then you could just stay at the same company, but trying to get varied experience in your 20s when you still have that chance and you're not in your prime earning stages.
It's a great question, Jim. And this is one where, I think everybody has a different view on this. My belief in your 20s is you ought to be broadening your skill set as opposed to sharpening your skill. And that means go broad. I think what happens, particularly when you're in schools, everybody wants to know how you're getting narrower. Take these classes because this will help you, narrow down these set of things, and you join a company and there's narrowing exercises where people want you to declare a major or what it is that you want to do before you frankly know anything. So I'm in some ways, because I'm the product of a system that forced me to go broader, and going broad means that how do you ensure, whether it's in a new job or not, that your rate of learning and development stays on a relatively steep curve. That can happen by changing jobs fairly often. I think preferably in one company, but if you can't change jobs, every week or month. So there's things around you in your job that you can go on your own and learn. So for me, it was, harassing an engineer when they came into work in the morning because I didn't know shit about engineering. And I would say, hey, if you teach me a little bit about engineering, how to design a flight control system, I'll teach you a little bit about how to, build a cost estimate for the product that you're designing. So just, open up your aperture, get out of your comfort zone and take advantage of your surroundings, whether it's, change jobs to become broader, not narrower, or just think of other ways, extracurricular activities, engaging with other people so you can learn more about their job along the way. And that accumulation of knowledge, really, again, this is, if I'm doing, career lens, not important lens like family and stuff, but for career lens, the more you see, the more you get out of your comfort zone, the more you inquire, the more you learn. And learning in your 20s is a real competitive advantage for those that are on a less steep learning curve.
Excellent. Any other questions before we wrap? Excellent. Well,
Hey, I just, if you don't mind, I just one last comment for me.
Sure.
You know, when and this is on the kind of reflections lens, and you know, a lot of you guys that this will sound crazy for you, but someday it'll matter. When I reflect on my career and the things that I'm most proud of, has nothing to do with what jobs I've had or what titles I had or what companies I had them with. And it has to do with the friendships built along the way. It has to do with my, you know, my wife of almost 30 years. It has to do with having two very grounded kids when I live in a world of, you know, a little bit of la la land here in Northern California. Family matter. Family's the real game. This business stuff is you know, the much less important, but the thing I'm most proud of is the friendships, being a good husband, not good enough, as my wife reminds me, being a good dad for our wonderful kids. That's the shit that I can talk about all day long. So I want to make sure that in the context of building our careers and you know, and accomplishing things, when I reflect back, that's what I feel most proud about. And my advice to you guys is make sure that every step along the way you're building friendships, because at the end of the day, that's what you reflect on, not whether your stock went up or you acquired a company, or it's about the friendships you built along the way. Those are the things that stay with you from one job to the next, is friendships and family.
that's a great way to close it. I know personally I feel the same way. I played with Fred. We lost touch for a while, but you know, here we are again, and you know, we're all part of this UB Rugby community that, you know, spans generations. And you know, from the Alumni Association, I want to again thank you for giving us your time and sharing your experience and reflections with us, Bob. I thought it was an awesome session. Really reinforce what we're trying to build here, and creating this community, and you know, tapping into each other's knowledge and skills and relationships. So again, thank you for giving us your time and for your insights. For Fred and Alex and Pete, thank you for putting, you know, help me put this together. For those that are listening, was this good? Is this something we should keep doing? Thumbs up, yeah. Nodding
Absolutely.
heads.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Excellent.
Oh, Paul, I think I speak for everyone on the team when I say we really appreciate you guys taking the time to do this, and Mr. Swan for your time. This is a really important aspect, I think, is connecting guys with alumni and bridging those gaps. Personally speaking, Paul has put me in contact with former alumni and has gotten me professional opportunities. So the stuff we're doing here is going to last us a lifetime. So I think it's really important, and I appreciate everyone being here and you guys for setting this up.
Excellent. That's all. That's what we want to hear. We've got some suggested speakers for our next session. We'll work on scheduling that, and hopefully it'll be just as well attended and interactive as this session. So again, thanks to Bob, thanks to all of you for making time and for joining us today. And I'll let you guys all get back to your lives and your families and your studies. Have a great evening, everybody.
And I'll see you on that
everybody.
40-year alumni game next spring.
Bob, we're gonna hold you to that.
You too, Bobby.
Excellent.
Thanks for the opportunity. All the best.
All righty.
Good night, guys. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.